The moment he said it, I felt something inside me collapse. Not explode. Not snap. Collapse. Like a chair giving out beneath someone who thought it was solid. We were sitting at the dining table, for plates, for chairs, one of those fake calm evenings where everyone pretends they're fine because it's easier than admitting they're not. The overhead light buzzed faintly. The food was getting cold. My wife was halfway through a story about her day, her voice drifting in and out of my attention like background noise. I was tired. Not just end-of-the-day tired, life tired. The kind that settles into your shoulders and makes you choose silence over conflict, even when you know silence costs more in the long run. My stepson leaned back in his chair, smirking. He had that confidence young men get when they haven't lost anything yet. When the world hasn't corrected them. He glanced at me, then at his mom, then back at me. "So," he said casually, stabbing at his food, "when are you gonna stop being a loser and do something real with your life?" The table went quiet. Not dramatic quiet. No gasps. No dropped forks. Just the kind of quiet where everyone hears it land and waits to see what happens next. I felt heat rush up my neck. My jaw tightened before I could stop it. I stared at my plate, suddenly fascinated by the cracks in the ceramic, the way the gravy pooled near the edge. "Loser." He didn't raise his voice. Didn't shout. That's what made it worse. It was delivered like a fact. Like he was commenting on the weather. My wife didn't say anything. She looked at him. Then at me. Then back at her plate. That hurt more than the word itself. I waited. 1 second. 2, 3. Nothing. My heart pounded. A dozen responses fought their way up my throat. Sharp ones. Angry ones. Desperate ones. I imagined slamming my hand on the table. Imagined putting him in his place. Imagined finally being the man who doesn't let anyone talk to him like that. But I didn't. I swallowed. I said nothing. Because I'd spent years convincing myself that silence was maturity. That keeping the peace made me the bigger man. That reacting would only prove something I didn't want to be. My stepson snorted. "See? That's what I mean." My wife finally spoke, her tone light, dismissive. "Enough. Let's just eat." Just eat. Like nothing had happened. I nodded once. Slowly. Carefully. Like I was afraid any sudden movement might crack me open. Inside, something shifted. Not anger. Awareness. I'd been shrinking for a long time. I didn't always feel like this. There was a time I believed in myself. A time when I thought stepping into a blended family meant earning respect naturally, through effort and patience. I paid bills. I showed up. I listened. I fixed things around the house. I stayed when things got uncomfortable. Somewhere along the way, that became invisible. Dinner ended without another word. Chairs scraped. Plates were cleared. My stepson disappeared into his room, headphones already on, insulated from consequences. My wife rinsed dishes at the sink. I watched her back, the familiar shape of someone I loved and didn't recognize anymore. "You okay?" she asked, not turning around. I hesitated. This was the moment. The opening. I could say no. I could say that hurt. I could ask why she didn't defend me. Instead I said, "Yeah." She nodded, satisfied. He didn't mean it. You know how he is. I didn't know how he was. And I knew how I'd allowed it. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. The word. The silence. The way my chest had tightened like I was being crushed from the inside. "Loser." I thought about my job, steady but unglamorous. About how I used to talk about ambition and plans and somewhere along the way stopped bringing them up because no one seemed interested. I thought about how often I'd laughed off jokes that stung just enough to remind me where I stood. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered because respect doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. Quietly. With every moment you choose comfort over honesty. I realized something then, lying there in the dark. My silence hadn't protected me. It had taught them exactly how far they could go. The next morning, I watched my stepson grab his keys, late for work, arrogant as ever. He barely looked at me. "Don't wait up," he muttered. I nodded. But this time, it felt different. Not weak. Measured. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I should say to him. I was thinking about what I needed to stop doing for him. And that thought stayed with me as the door slammed shut behind him. Slow, steady, uncomfortable. Something had started. And I knew, deep down, that staying silent again would cost me more than I was willing to pay. Silence feels clean in the moment. It feels like control. That's the lie I'd been telling myself for years. The morning after the dinner, the house moved around me like nothing had happened. My wife drank her coffee at the counter, scrolling through her phone. The hum of the refrigerator filled the gaps where words should have been. Outside, the day went on indifferent. I showered, dressed, tied my shoes. Every routine motion felt heavier than it should have, like I was carrying something invisible on my back. At work, I caught myself replaying the moment again. Loser. Not shouted. Not weaponized with anger. Just stated. I sat at my desk staring at emails, watching deadlines stack up. I'd been here a long time, reliable, consistent, overlooked. The kind of guy people depended on but never worried about losing. There's a strange loneliness in being dependable. You become furniture. I thought about how often I'd swallowed opinions in meetings. How many times I'd watched louder, less prepared men take credit for ideas I helped shape. I told myself it was professionalism. That patience paid off. It rarely does. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A message from my wife. Can you pick up dinner tonight? He's working late. Always him. No acknowledgement of the night before. No apology. No discomfort. Just expectation. I typed sure before I could stop myself. Then I stared at the screen. Why was it always sure? I leaned back in my chair, the question settling uncomfortably in my chest. When had my role narrowed to convenience? When did being understanding turn into being invisible? I remembered early days with my wife, how she used to ask my opinion, how she listened. Back then, her son was younger, unsure, still figuring out where I fit. I tried too hard. I see that now. I overcompensated with generosity. Covered gaps. Paid for things without being asked. Smoothed over messes that weren't mine. I thought effort earned respect. What it earned was entitlement. That realization hit harder than the insult itself. After work, I sat in the grocery store parking lot longer than necessary, hands on the steering wheel, engine off. I watched other men load groceries into their cars. Some laughed into their phones. Some looked exhausted. Some walked with a quiet confidence I couldn't quite name. None of them looked like they were apologizing for existing. At home, my stepson wasn't back yet. My wife chopped vegetables, music playing softly. I set the bags on the counter. You didn't have to get the expensive stuff, she said without looking up. I almost laughed. I almost said something sharp. Instead, I asked, did it bother you? What he said. She paused. Just for a second. Not really, she said. He was joking. You're too sensitive. Too sensitive. I nodded, even though something inside me recoiled. That word, sensitive, had followed me my whole life. A way to dismiss pain without addressing it. A way to turn reaction into weakness. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. Strong hands. Capable hands. Hands that fixed leaks, carried boxes, worked long hours. Hands that somehow still didn't earn respect. The truth settled in slowly, painfully. Silence hadn't made me noble. It had made me predictable. And predictability breeds contempt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about all the moments I'd told myself this isn't worth the fight. All the times I chose short-term peace over long-term dignity. I realized something else, too. No one had forced me into this role. I'd volunteered. That didn't mean yelling, or threats, or dramatic ultimatums. It meant something quieter. Withdrawal. I didn't know exactly what that looked like yet. I just knew what it didn't. No more cushioning consequences. No more stepping in early. No more fixing problems before they were felt. Late that night, I heard my stepson come home. Doors opening. Keys dropping. Laughter through his phone. I stayed where I was. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to engage. I felt distance. And underneath it, something unfamiliar. Relief. Because once you see what silence costs you, you start asking a different question. Not why don't they respect me, but why have I been paying the price for their comfort? I lay back and stared at the ceiling, the same one I'd stared at the night before. Only now, the thought looping through my mind wasn't regret. It was resolve. And somewhere in that quiet house, the rules were already beginning to change. I didn't hate the man my stepson compared me to. That surprised me. For a while I thought I should. Thought resentment was the natural response. But every time his name floated into my head, what I felt wasn't anger. It was distance. Like looking at a billboard for a place you've never been, advertising a life that doesn't really exist. My stepson talked about his biological father the way boys talk about legends. Selective details. Edited stories. Wins exaggerated, losses erased. He called him confident. Successful. A real man. I'd never corrected him. Not because I didn't know better, but because I didn't want to be the guy tearing down a fantasy. Now I wondered who that silence had really protected. At work that week, I ran into Mark from accounting in the break room. We weren't close, but close enough for the kind of conversations men have when no one else is listening. He nodded toward his coffee. You hear about Greg? I shook my head. Guy's a mess. Bounced between 3 jobs in 2 years. Owes half the city money. He paused. Confidence though. You gotta give him that. The name landed heavier than it should have. That was him. The legend. The real man. I didn't say anything. Just nodded, like I didn't know exactly who we were talking about. That's when it hit me. My stepson wasn't worshipping strength. He was worshipping projection. The version of masculinity that looks loud from a distance and hollow up close. I drove home that night thinking about how much power illusion has when you don't challenge it. How easy it is to believe confidence equals competence, volume equals value. I'd spent years doing the opposite, being quiet, steady, responsible. I thought substance would speak for itself. It rarely does. That evening, my stepson came home late again, tossing his keys on the counter like punctuation. He talked loudly on his phone, pacing, laughing, living in a world where consequences still felt optional. I watched from the hallway. He didn't see me. For the first time, I noticed how much of his confidence depended on other people absorbing the fallout. My wife appeared beside me. He's just like his dad, she said softly, almost fondly. I didn't respond, because now I heard what she meant. Not strong. Not capable. Untouched. She wasn't praising the man. She was excusing the boy. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table alone, lights dimmed, listening to the hum of the house. I thought about the image I'd been competing with, a man who didn't show up, didn't commit, didn't stay long enough to be tested. That's an easy standard to lose against. I realized something else then. I'd been fighting the wrong opponent. This wasn't about height or money or confidence. It was about presence. I was there. I carried weight. And weight bends things over time. The fantasy couldn't survive pressure. But pressure had to be applied. Not with confrontation. With reality. The next morning, my stepson asked me for a favor like it was nothing. Needed me to call in a favor at work. Smooth over an issue. Make something disappear. Normally I would have. I looked at him. Really looked. I can't, I said. He blinked. Why not? Because it's not my problem. The words felt strange in my mouth. Heavy. Honest. He scoffed. Figures. And there it was again. Loser. Only this time, it didn't stick. Because I finally saw the structure holding that word up. And it wasn't me. It was an illusion propped up by silence. As he walked away, irritation trailing behind him, I felt something solid settle into place. I wasn't stepping into conflict. I was stepping out of a lie. And I knew, without needing proof yet, that once reality started applying pressure, the legend wouldn't hold. Not for long. The hardest habit to break isn't anger. It's rescue. I didn't announce anything. There was no speech, no line in the sand. I just stopped moving before someone else asked me to. Stopped reaching for problems that weren't mine and calling it responsibility. The first test came faster than I expected. My stepson missed a payment. Not a big one. small enough to be annoying, big enough to feel urgent. He paced the kitchen with his phone pressed to his ear, voice raised just enough for me to hear. Words like misunderstanding and temporary floated through the air. He glanced at me between sentences, waiting for the moment I'd step in. I didn't. I stayed where I was, rinsing a mug at the sink, listening to water run. He hung up and scoffed. "They're idiots," he said, like that explained everything. Normally, I would have asked questions. Offered a solution. Transferred money without making it a thing. I dried the mug and put it away. "Sounds like you'll figure it out," I said. He stared at me, confused. "That's it? That's it." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded. He muttered something under his breath and stormed out. I felt the old itch, guilt curling in my stomach, the reflex to chase him down, to smooth it over. I sat with it instead. That night, my wife confronted me in the bedroom. She closed the door a little too carefully. "You're being cold," she said. I leaned against the dresser. "I'm being clear." "He needs support," she insisted. "You know how things are right now." I nodded. "I do." She crossed her arms. "Then why won't you help?" I took a breath. Slow. Measured. "Because helping hasn't helped," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't used to me answering like that. "This isn't like you," she said. I almost smiled. "That's kind of the point." She shook her head, frustrated. "You're punishing him." "No," I said. "I'm stopping myself." That landed harder than I expected. She went quiet, eyes searching my face for something familiar. Something compliant. She didn't find it. The days that followed felt strange. Lighter and heavier at the same time. I went to work and focused on my own deadlines instead of checking my phone for fires to put out. I left meetings when they ended instead of lingering to be useful. I said no when no was the honest answer. Nothing dramatic happened. At first, my stepson started coming home later. He laughed louder. Spent more time out, less time dealing with whatever he'd been avoiding. Confidence surged when pressure eased. I recognized the pattern. It's easy to feel untouchable when someone else has been absorbing the impact. One evening, he asked me for a ride after his car wouldn't start. The request came wrapped in irritation, like I was inconveniencing him by existing. "Can you come get me?" he said. "I'm stuck." I checked the time. Looked at the stack of papers on my desk. Thought about the meetings I'd canceled for him before. "I can't tonight," I said. The pause. "What do you mean you can't?" "I mean I can't." He exhaled sharply. "Unbelievable." I hung up and sat there, heart thudding. Not from fear. From restraint. My wife didn't speak to me much that week. When she did, it was clipped. Efficient. As if warmth was a reward I'd forfeited. I noticed something then. Peace that requires self-erasure isn't peace. It's a transaction. At work, something shifted too. A meeting ran long, and when someone tried to pin a missed detail on me, I corrected them. Calmly. Clearly. "That wasn't my responsibility," I said. The room went still. Then the conversation moved on. No punishment. No backlash. Just reality adjusting. At home, the adjustments were louder. Bills stacked up on the counter. My stepson's jokes sharpened. His confidence cracked around the edges. He blamed everyone. Systems. Managers. He never blamed himself. And for the first time, that wasn't my job to fix. One night, he exploded at dinner. Fork clattered. Words spilled fast. "You think you're better than me now?" he snapped. I met his eyes. "I think I'm responsible for myself." My wife slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. Both of you." I stood. Pushed my chair in. "I'm going for a walk," I said. Outside the air was cool. The city hummed. I walked without a destination, letting the noise settle my thoughts. I realized then that stepping back wasn't abandonment. It was honesty. You can't build a man by shielding him from gravity. When I got home, the house was quiet. I stood in the doorway of the living room, looking at the space I'd been bending myself to fit. I wasn't angry. I was done intervening. And somewhere beneath the tension, beneath the guilt, I felt it again. That unfamiliar relief. Because once you stop intercepting consequences, they don't disappear. They just change direction. And I knew, felt it in my bones, that they were already on their way. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part people never understand. They imagine collapse as something loud, sirens, shouting, doors slammed hard enough to crack frames. But most falls are quiet, incremental, a series of small miscalculations stacked on top of one another until gravity finally wins. I saw it coming before anyone else did. Not because I was smarter, because I'd stopped standing underneath him. The first sign was the job. He came home earlier than usual one afternoon, shoulders tense, jaw set. He didn't announce anything. Just dropped his bag by the door and went straight to his room. No phone calls. No laughter. No pacing. The house felt different. Heavy. At dinner, he pushed food around his plate without eating. My wife tried to fill the silence with questions about his day, her voice soft, coaxing. "Everything okay at work?" she asked. He shrugged. "They're idiots." That was all. Normally, I would have asked follow-ups. Offered advice. Told him how to smooth things over, who to talk to, what to say. I didn't. I focused on chewing. On breathing. On letting the discomfort exist without rushing to erase it. 2 days later, I heard the truth through a cracked door. "Are you serious?" He snapped into his phone. "You can't do that." The pause. "What do you mean, final?" Another pause. Then silence. The kind that lingers. He stormed out of his room and slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. My wife looked at me, eyes wide. "What was that?" I met her gaze. "Still, I think he lost his job," I said. She stared like she didn't recognize me. "How can you be so sure?" "Because this is what it sounds like when there's no one left to blame." She didn't like that answer. Neither did he. The car went next. Not immediately. Slowly. Warning lights ignored. Payments delayed. Calls unanswered. One morning, I watched from the window as a tow truck backed into the driveway. The operator moved efficiently, practiced. My stepson stood nearby, arms crossed, face red with rage and disbelief. "This is bull," he started yelling at no one in particular. My wife rushed outside, panic written across her face. She asked questions the driver didn't answer. Pleaded. Promised to call someone. She looked back at me through the glass. Waiting. I stayed where I was. Because stepping in now wouldn't be help. It would be erasure. When the truck pulled away, the driveway looked too empty. Like something essential had been removed. He turned on me the moment he came inside. "This is your fault," he said. "You could have helped." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't flinch. "I didn't cause this," I said. "And I'm not responsible for fixing it." He laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think you're teaching me a lesson?" "No," I said. "Life is." That was when my wife snapped. She accused me of being heartless. Of enjoying this. Of finally getting some kind of twisted revenge. I listened. When she finished, I said, "If this feels cruel, it's because we've been postponing it." She turned away, shaking. The friends disappeared next. The same ones who'd filled our house with noise and energy on weekends. The ones who borrowed money and never rushed to return it. The ones who praised his confidence when things were easy. Confidence doesn't survive inconvenience. I watched him scroll through his phone late at night, thumb flicking faster, frustration rising. Messages left unread. Calls unanswered. The world was shrinking. And for the first time, I could see fear underneath the arrogance. Real fear. One night he knocked on my door. That alone told me everything. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice lower than I'd ever heard it. I nodded. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, eyes darting around the room like he was looking for something solid to hold on to. "I just need a little help," he said. "Just until I get back on my feet." There was the moment I'd been unknowingly preparing for. I felt the old reflex surge, the instinct to rescue, to smooth, to prove my worth through usefulness. I let it pass. "What does help look like to you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Money. Calls. A place to stay if things get weird." I took a breath. "I'm not doing that," I said. His head snapped up. So you're just going to watch me fail? I met his eyes. I'm going to watch you learn. He stood abruptly, anger flaring. You're a loser, he spat. You always have been. The word landed and slid right off, because now I knew where it came from. Fear doesn't insult strength. It insults mirrors. He left the room without another word. My wife stood in the hallway afterward, eyes glossy. You're really going to let this happen? She asked. I answered honestly. I'm not letting it happen. I'm not stopping it. That night, the house felt unfamiliar, like we were all guests in a life that had finally stopped pretending. I lay awake listening to the sounds, drawers opening, pacing, the muffled thud of something thrown against a wall. I didn't intervene, because some lessons don't arrive until there's nothing left between a man and his choices. By the end of the week, the truth was unavoidable. No job, no car, no backup plan, and no one left to absorb the consequences. My phone rang late one night. A known number. I stared at it until it stopped. A moment later, my wife's phone rang. She answered, panic already rising in her voice. As I listened from the other room, one thought settled calmly into place. This wasn't the end. It was the turning point, and whatever came next would demand a decision I could no longer avoid. The phone ringing at midnight doesn't sound like other calls. It's sharper, more urgent, like it already knows something is wrong before you do. I was half asleep when it happened, caught between thoughts, the room dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight leaking through the blinds. My wife's phone buzzed first on the nightstand. Twice. She stirred beside me, groggy, irritated. Then it rang again. She sat up too fast. Who calls this late? I already knew. She answered with her name, her voice soft but tight. I turned slightly toward her, listening without pretending not to. The silence on her end stretched. Then her breath caught. What do you mean he's not there? She said. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. She swung her legs off the bed, pacing now. Did you try his friends? No, don't tell me that. He wouldn't. I sat up, heart steady, mind clear in a way it hadn't been in weeks. When she finally hung up, her hands were shaking. He's gone, she said. He didn't come home. His phone's off. He doesn't have anywhere to stay. She looked at me like the answer was obvious. Like this was the part where I fixed it. Okay, I said quietly. That wasn't what she expected. Okay, she snapped. That's it? Our son is out there with nothing and you're saying okay? I rubbed my face, slow and deliberate. I'm saying I hear you. She stopped pacing. Then do something. There was the command I'd lived under for years. I took a breath. Longer this time. No, I said. The word landed hard. Her eyes widened. What do you mean, no? I mean I'm not chasing him, I said. I'm not calling favors. I'm not wiring money at midnight. Her voice rose. So you're just abandoning him? I shook my head. I'm refusing to abandon myself. She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. This is unbelievable. You're choosing now to make some kind of point. This isn't a point, I said. It's a boundary. She crossed her arms, tears welling. You're supposed to be the bigger man. That sentence hit something deep. I stood up, feeling the floor solid beneath my feet. I've been shrinking for years, I said. Don't confuse that with strength. She stared at me like she'd never heard me speak before. You let him disrespect you, she said. You let this happen. I nodded. Yes, I did. That admission startled her more than any denial could have. And I'm done paying for it, I continued. I won't rescue him from lessons we both avoided teaching. She sank onto the edge of the bed, hands covering her face. You're cruel, she whispered. I softened my voice, but not my stance. I'm consistent. We stood there in the quiet aftermath, the weight of years pressing in around us. All the compromises. All the silences. All the ways we'd mistaken comfort for harmony. What if something happens to him? She asked. I answered honestly. Then we deal with that. Together. But not like this. Not by pretending consequences are optional. She looked up at me then really looked. And what if this changes us? She asked. I didn't dodge it. Then it was already changing, I said. That was the truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. She didn't argue after that. Just lay back down, turned away from me, shoulders shaking quietly. I stayed standing, staring at the wall, listening to the house settle. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what this cost. Because I finally understood the price of avoiding it. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. A message this time. She checked it, wiped her eyes. He found a place for the night, she said flatly. I nodded. Good. She waited for more. There wasn't any. We lay back down in silence, a different kind than before. Not avoidance. Assessment. As sleep finally crept back in, one thought stayed with me. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about us. And soon, I'd have to decide whether holding my ground meant standing alone. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was worried about him, but because something inside me had finally stopped bending. Morning came quietly, the way it always does after a night that changes everything. Pale light crept through the blinds. The house smelled like stale coffee and unfinished conversations. My wife was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like it might give her permission to feel better. She didn't look up when I entered. He texted, she said. He's okay. I poured myself coffee, black, no sugar. Good. That was it. She slammed her phone down. You're really doing this, aren't you? I leaned against the counter, feeling steady. I already did it. She stared at me, eyes tired but sharp. You think this makes you strong? I thought about that. About the years I'd confused silence with peace. About every apology I'd swallowed to keep the temperature down. I think it makes me honest, I said. She stood, pacing again. So what, now we just let him figure it out alone? I shook my head. We let him take responsibility. That's not abandonment. That's adulthood. She scoffed. Easy for you to say. He's not even your real son. The words landed like a slap. There was the truth she only used when she wanted to wound. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't clench my fists. I've acted like he was, I said calmly. Every day. Until last week. She crossed her arms, defensive now. He was angry. He didn't mean it. He meant it enough, I replied. And you meant your silence. That stopped her. The kitchen felt smaller, the air heavier. I won't live in a house where disrespect is rewarded, I continued. Not from him. Not from anyone. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. So what are you saying? I took a breath. I'm saying the line is drawn. Her voice dropped. And if I don't like where you drew it? I met her eyes. Then we talk about that. Honestly. But I won't erase it to keep things comfortable. Silence stretched between us. For the first time, I wasn't negotiating my worth. Later that afternoon, he showed up. I heard the door before I saw him, hesitant footsteps, keys fumbling like he wasn't sure he was welcome. I stayed in the living room, seated, waiting. He walked in wearing the same jacket he'd stormed out in days ago. Tired eyes. Unshaven. Pride cracked but not gone. Hey, he muttered. I nodded. Sit. He hesitated, then dropped onto the chair across from me. My wife hovered near the doorway, arms folded tight, watching like a referee afraid to blow the whistle. I heard you're having a rough week, I said. He shrugged. Stuff happens. I leaned forward slightly. Stuff happens when choices catch up. His jaw tightened. So what, you're here to lecture me now? No, I said. I'm here to tell you how things are going to be. That got his attention. You don't live here rent-free anymore, I continued. You don't talk to me, or anyone, like you did at that dinner. And you don't get rescued from messes you create. He laughed, bitter. Wow. Guess you finally found your backbone. I let the insult pass through me. I've always had one, I said. I just stopped hiding it. My wife stepped forward. You can stay here for now, she said quickly. We'll figure something out. I held up a hand. Conditions, I said. Clear ones. He looked between us, confused, irritated. You serious? Yes, I said. Job applications start tomorrow. Just respect. Miss those and you find somewhere else. He stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're treating me like a child. I stood too, slow and deliberate. No. I'm treating you like a man. That landed. He searched my face, looking for weakness. For guilt. For the old version of me who would fold. He didn't find it. You think you're better than me? He snapped. No, I said. I think I'm done being smaller than you. My wife's eyes filled with tears. Please, she whispered. Just try. He exhaled hard, shoulders slumping. Fine, he said. Whatever. He walked past me toward his room, the door closing harder than necessary. The house exhaled with him. My wife turned to me, voice shaking. You didn't have to be so cold. I looked at her, not unkindly. I wasn't cold. I was clear. She shook her head. I don't know who you are right now. I nodded. Neither did I, for a long time. That night, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the distant sound of traffic, the world moving forward whether we were ready or not. I thought about the line I'd drawn, not in anger, not in revenge, but in self-respect. Some people would step up to meet it. Others would walk away. Either way, I wasn't stepping back. Inside, a door opened quietly. Footsteps approached. He stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. I didn't mean what I said, he muttered. At dinner. I waited. I was pissed, he added. About my job. About everything. I nodded once. I figured. He swallowed. Doesn't excuse it. No, I said. It doesn't. But I let the silence do the rest. He lingered a moment longer, then went back inside. I stayed where I was, staring into the dark. The line was drawn. Tomorrow, we'd all find out who respected it. The morning after everything broke open, the house felt different. Not quieter. Not calmer. Honest. Sunlight came through the kitchen window in thin, pale lines, cutting across the table where so many things had gone unsaid for years. I stood there holding a mug I'd reheated twice without drinking, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside. Ordinary sounds. A new weight. This was the morning after choosing myself. My wife came in slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed in the room yet. Her eyes were tired, swollen from crying, but clearer than I'd seen them in a long time. He texted, she said. I didn't turn right away. Is he okay? She nodded. He found a couch. Starts looking for work today. Good. She waited for me to say more. I didn't. That was part of the change. She pulled out a chair, sat across from me. The space between us felt deliberate now, not distance, but definition. I didn't realize how long I'd been asking you to disappear, she said quietly. That landed heavier than any accusation. I finally looked at her. I didn't realize how good I was at it. We sat with that truth. No rush to soften it. No need to defend. For years, she continued, I told myself keeping the peace was the same as being fair. She shook her head. It wasn't. I let the silence stretch. Let her finish. I chose him over you more times than I want to admit, she said. Not because you were wrong. Because I knew you wouldn't leave. There was. The unspoken contract finally spoken aloud. I nodded once. I stayed because I didn't know who I was without being needed. She flinched, not at blame, but recognition. What happens now? She asked. I took a slow breath. Now we decide if we're partners, or just survivors who got used to each other. Tears slid down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. I don't want to lose you. I'm not offering myself up to be lost, I said gently. I'm offering to be met. That was the line. Not an ultimatum. The truth. Later that afternoon, my stepson showed up. No announcement. No attitude. Just a knock. I opened the door and saw something unfamiliar on his face. Uncertainty. Hey, he said. Hey. He stood there like he expected permission to exist. I messed up, he said finally. I thought respect was automatic. He swallowed. I was wrong. I studied him for a moment, not to intimidate, but to be sure. You don't owe me admiration, I said. You owe the world effort. He nodded. I'm trying. I know, I said. And I meant it. He glanced past me toward the kitchen. Mom. She's inside, I said. You can come in. He hesitated. I won't stay long. That's your choice, I replied. Just don't waste it. That was all. No speeches. No forgiveness scene. Just clarity. After he left, my wife came to stand beside me at the door. You didn't humiliate him, she said. I wasn't trying to win, I said. I was trying to be real. She leaned her head against my shoulder, tentative, like trust was something that had to be rebuilt muscle by muscle. I see you now, she whispered. I rested my chin on her head. I was always here. That night I sat alone on the porch, listening to the crickets, the world wide and indifferent in the best way. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who swallowed words to avoid conflict, who confused patience with weakness, who thought love meant endurance. I didn't hate him. He did what he knew. But I wasn't him anymore. I had learned something simple and costly and permanent. Respect isn't demanded. It's demonstrated. And sometimes the most powerful thing a man can say is the quietest word he's ever spoken. Not in anger. Not in revenge. But in truth. And once you say it, you don't go back. You move forward, lighter, steadier, carrying only what's worth keeping.